Have you just clicked the video and are now fascinated what you are seeing? Follow along and I will show you step by step how I made this and how you can easily make this as well. But beware, it involves using fire. Here you can see all the materials that you are going to use for step 1, which is a canvas. I myself used an MDF board here because this had a harder surface than a canvas has, and I was not sure if the canvas is going to soak up too much of the medium that we are going to use in a second, so I went for an MDF board, which is an even surface, it is sealed and it is not about to warp when it's going to go wet. Besides that, you're going to use some alcohol inks, and I must admit I have those for ages. I have them since Miriam with a Y was talking about them, and she always makes so pretty videos about them, and I just could not get a hang for it. I tried them a couple of times and I always asked myself, dude, why can't you do something pretty with them? I don't know, I just applied them, I let them dry, it always looked like I have never used them before. Well, I never used them before. But I never could get something pretty out of them, and I was a bit bummed that I had them lying around unused. So I wanted to give it a try at least one more time. What else you're going to use is some alcohol, and I myself used isopropanol 99.5%. And this is basically just to thin the inks and spread them around on the surface. When it comes to the colors to use, you of course can go crazy. I have only a couple of colors, so I just picked the ones that I had. But if you have alcohol inks lying around and want to use whatever color you want to use, even if it's not becoming a space scene in the end, use what you have, the technique should be very much the same. So I opened my inks and of course I tried not to spill all over my fingers, which I did when I opened them the first time. It was fun, believe me, it's really fun to remove them. So I basically just dripped them onto my surface, and this was a pretty much flowing around process, and at this point I had no idea where to go. Honestly, I just dripped them on there, mixed some of the colors together and hoped for the best. I used the alcohol bottle filled with alcohol and sprayed it on the MDF board just to thin the paints down and to have something fluid on there. Because now comes the fun part, and I'm pretty sure the camera cannot really catch this. Or at least not as good as I was able to see it standing in front of it. Because when my paint was there, when the alcohol was mixed in, I just picked a match and burned it. I just was curious to see what is going to happen, and of course it started burning rather quickly, and it was fun to see how the paints reacted. So of course I opened the window. I didn't expect anything toxic, but just to be on the safe side, and I had some water standing next to me just in case things go crazy. I never tried this before, and I really encourage you, if you try this yourself, make precautions. So have some water nearby or a fire extinguisher or something like that, just in case something goes wrong. Everything worked out beautifully. It just burned down the alcohol very smoothly and pretty. And I just wanted to see how the end result is going to look like, what it does to the paints, if it creates some kind of cool pattern, and it was just amazing to look at. I actually expected that everything will be dry once the fire went over, but it wasn't. Basically all the alcohol was gone and evaporated, but some of the inks still pooled up in some lines, which I also thought will evaporate because alcohol fire drying, it didn't. So it was still sitting on there, and I just pushed a kitchen towel, one of these paper towels, on there to remove a bit of the pooled up ink, and then I let it dry as it was. Next step, this one needs to have a planet sitting in there. And for creating a planet there are countless possibilities. You can just use your paint and paint your planet in. You can just, I don't know, cut one out of a newspaper and glue it on there. Or whatever idea you basically come up with. I, for myself, lately just love making the planets out of an acrylic pour, which you might have seen in other of my videos already. If not, I will link them on cards here somewhere in the video or in the end of the video, so that you can check them out. This is a very easy technique and always looks pretty and gives this extra kick to your piece because it gives so much more definition, and areas to look at, you basically just have to make a swipe. I myself did not film it here, but you can see it in the video, and this is just some kind of plastic paper, so it's a transparent office paper, so to speak, where I put the paints on, silicone mixed in and swiped over it. This will give you these fine tiny lines, these fine tiny cells, which you will need for the planet. Having you mix the silicone really much into your paints, you will have these tiny cells which look awesome as a planet. And of course you can pour a large sheet, swipe over there, let it dry, and you can make many planets out of it. So this is basically just a small sheet that I did here out of leftover paints, and then you need something round to make the planet of the size that you want to use. And I just used some cup, turned it over and painted the half ring that I'm going to need and cut it out. I would recommend using something really thin to pour on because you don't want it to stand out on the painting in the end. Or if you are good at making acrylic skins, I am not, then you can use them as well. So if you have an acrylic skin that you think looks cool, go ahead and use this one. Something that I always love to do is using my airbrush, especially when it comes to the light and the dark side of the planet. This makes things so much easier as you have a smooth transition line and you can just go over it and make it brighter or darker. It's just easy. If you don't have an airbrush, don't panic, you can do this with a brush yourself, or if you have spray paints, you can use the spray paints instead. But when you want to use a brush, just use very little amounts of paints and dip it on there and basically dry brush on there. So it takes a bit more time as you need to build up all these layers of paint to get the depth that you want to have in a transition, but it will work pretty much the same. Of course, the airbrush is the easier and in the end, to be honest, better looking version because it's smoother, but it will work quite the same if you only want to use a brush. I would recommend though use it on a scrap piece of paper just to get a hang for it, how it works, how the paint dry, and just to get a feeling for it. And when this is done and this is dried, I just glued this planet onto my little MDF board. I used some regular glue for this. You can also use acrylic paints, paint it underneath and press it on your surface. This will glue everything together pretty much the same. I used glue, whatever you want to use, it will work. When I had my planet on there, I felt that the background itself lacked a bit of contrast. So I again grabbed my airbrush, used some purple in it and went over some of the areas of the background that I thought might look cool if they were darker. Just like a space nebula and the planet is sitting in there, somewhere is sun shining through to lighten up the right part of the nebula, such, you know what I mean? So I just made some areas darker, and again using the airbrush was the easiest way to do, but you can also use the other method that I told you before for this. Or if you feel fancy, you of course can also layer up on using the acrylic inks. So if you want to use them, go ahead and use them. When things were set, dried and ready to go, I needed some more stars on there. There are also many different ways of creating stars on such a project. You can use a brush, you can use a toothbrush and sprinkle them on there, which is a bit uncontrolled. And I wanted it to be a bit more controlled as there are not so many stars shining within a nebula. So if we have plain black space with only very little color shades of nebulas, you can go crazy with stars because you will see so many of them there, like watching upwards in the sky in the night. But sitting in a nebula, you will only see these brightest and closest stars, so I didn't want to have too many on there. So again, use a brush, a very tiny one, or use a toothpick and just push it into the paint and bump it on your canvas. I used both methods here, just use the one that you feel more comfortable with and what you like the most actually. You can also vary the colors of your planet, so I just used white here, but you can also use some white, some yellow, some orange, some blue, whatever your stars basically should look like. Having this done, it was time to seal the edges, because in the end this one is going to get a resin coat to seal everything perfectly. To prevent the resin from flowing over the edges, I normally use some tape and tape it around the edges. The tape that I'm using is called duct tape, T-Rex tape, military tape. It has so many different names. It is a pretty strong tape with fabric woven into it, and this one works perfectly for the artworks because it seals completely tight to the surface itself, but once dried the resin is not going to stick to it, so you can remove it perfectly. You might have already wondered why my planet is not covering the entire bottom of the surface. And normally, if I just was about to make the planet itself, I would of course make it the way that everything is sitting on the canvas, that there are no gaps, that the planet of course covers the entire area. But I wanted to go some fancy and to make it even more sparkly on this one, just to add even more interest to look at. Because as of now, you might agree something is still missing there. And when you glimpse to the left side of my frame here, you can already see some broken glass and stones sitting there. And this is what I'm going to add to this piece. Because my planet is going to get a ring. And if I even had a little talent for singing, I would use the Beyoncé song, Put a Ring on It there. But I don't. Yeah, these are just broken glass stones. I have them in clear, which looks white here. So the smaller ones are about 1 millimeter in size and the larger ones are about 4 to 5 millimeter in size, which gives it a good variation in the sizes and it makes it all look cool together. By applying these stones, you can just play around with them. The surface is dry, so you can move them around until you have the look that you want to have. I added first the larger pieces just to make the entire ring design, and then added the smaller pieces around it as kind of transition towards the resin in the end, like these little rocks and asteroids flying around in the rings. So basically just to have some variation there. When the design is ready, the last step can actually begin, which is resining the entire piece. Your edges are sealed, resin is going to be contained, your glass is on there, your planet is fixed, your stars are made, so the resin can go over it. I mixed the resin. I herefore use the Mastercast resin. You can also use the art resin, resonate resin, whatever resin you have. Just see that it's a non-yellowing one. And in case you really do not want to use resin, you can also use a varnish. So for example, if you use the Ultra Gloss Liquitex varnish, you can pretty much use the very same techniques. You just need to use more of the varnish than you would normally use, because you really need this pooled up. So the amount must be a bit larger, and it of course will take some time to dry, because normally you apply the varnishes in a thin layer, and here you just pour it on there. So it will need pretty much time to dry in the end. But you will get very much the same effect, but it has to be a gloss or ultra gloss varnish, because the satin or matte varnishes are going to become milky, so this will not work with those. So I mixed it up. Mine was a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1 part of the hardener, 1 part of the resin. Mixed everything together until no streaks and streams are in there, and basically just needed a clear one just to coat everything. But I wanted to have some sparkle because space needs glitter. I find an excuse for every painting to use glitter, you know? But I wanted to have some sparkle in the rings just to make them look like ice rings. So glitter was the perfect medium to use for these rings. You can just use white glitter or silver glitter. I used some glitter flakes that I had from Miss Colorberry's color pigments, but you can just use white glitter or silver glitter, so nothing really fancy there. I used a very small amount of the resin that I had mixed my glitter pigments in there and stirred them well. Added them over the glass and it was pretty easy and pretty sparkly, which was cool. So over time they started moving a bit over the planet, which I tried to prevent by using my palette knife and just scratched them back towards the rings. It worked kind of, but some of the glitter flakes just went over the planet, which is okay because some smaller flying around asteroids around the planet are just okay. Besides that, I also used some purple pigment paste with some rest amount of the resin just to increase the darkness and the layer effect on the left side, so that it looks more three-dimensional and just to increase the depth and the contrast even more. I also used some white pigment paste along with a tiny amount of resin just to make some more white dots within the clear resin layer to make three-dimensional stars, so to speak. It is not really visible now in the very end when everything is cured, but I thought it might have been a good idea. Besides that, everything is coated with the clear resin. I use the torch to pop the air bubbles every now and then, but make sure to not heat it up too much, because otherwise it's going to be too liquid and your colored pigments and your glitter might flow a bit too much to directions that you do not want to have. So just go over there really gently. In the very end, to increase the contrast of the rings itself, I used some of the white resin mix, so the resin with the white pigment paste, and dripped it over the rings just to have there more contrast, like the sun is hitting them, and to make it look a bit cooler, I'd say. And then we are done. Pretty simple, isn't it? I know it looks a bit complicated, but it really was fun to do. And overall it had about 45 minutes working time, with these drying times in between, of course. And the result is just really cool. For a project that I had no idea in the beginning where it's going to turn to, I really love this project, and for sure this is not the last of them. I might need to try this on a larger scale, but now I really cannot wait to hear what you think about it, how you like it, if you have ever burned your alcohol inks as well, or if you even consider trying this. It was a foolish idea in the beginning, and I really so much liked the result, how it turned out. Let me know in the comments what you think, how you liked it, if you did something like that yourself, and if you did, I would love to see you tagging me on Instagram or Facebook just to give me an impression what you created. I would really love to see that. If you liked this video, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you have not done so far. I would be super happy if you could share this video with your friends, family, and every space lover out there. And yeah, just thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching, and other than that, I hope to see you in my next video. Have a great day. Bye bye.